Hi! In this video we're going to see how we get on reading a handful of notes in the tenor clef. And the tenor clef may well be something that never needs to trouble you, because if you play the piano, for example, you never have to read music in the tenor clef. However, there are some instruments, of course, that do use a tenor clef. So if you're a cellist, you might well have quite a lot of notes to deal with in the tenor clef. If you're a bassoonist, you'll have some notes to deal with in the tenor clef. If you're a trombonist, you might be asked to deal with some tenor clef reading. So there are various people who use the tenor clef. If you're one of the people who doesn't need to be troubled by it, well, you could either switch off now and do something else, or you could take the view that you might be wanting to write something if you're a composer or an arranger for somebody who's going to need to read it in the tenor clef. You might even be accompanying somebody who's reading in the tenor clef, or trying to read an orchestral score where you've got some players dealing with the tenor clef. So it's sort of useful to know about. And certainly if you're ever needing to take a theory exam, there'll come a point, quite often at grade 5, when you need to know about the tenor clef. So if you want to do even more on it, have a look at the film and video resources we've got on the website for grade 5 theory, and you'll find some extra work on the tenor clef. Anyway, let's have a look at it. It's sometimes called the C clef, just like the alto clef, which is also called a C clef, because the middle of the clef is the note C. And furthermore, the middle of the clef is the note middle C. So we can see that this fourth line up is middle C. So this first note that I've written is middle C. Notice how the clef is drawn. There are different ways to draw the clef, by the way, but the clef will always start on this second line up and go to a sort of imaginary ledger line above the stave, and you must always have the middle of the clef around that fourth line up, so we're crystal clear that this note is middle C. Now at one level this is then quite easy to deal with, because if you know that this note is middle C, well, you can count down and count up and find the notes you need. So I could go, well, that's C, B, A, G, F, E. That's one way of doing it. I could do that a little bit quicker by jumping down the lines, C, A, F, E. Another way of doing it is to think, well, what would this be in the treble clef? Well, in the treble clef that would be D. Take it down one, it's C, but don't forget then you'll have to take it down an octave. So that looks like this D in the treble clef. Take it down one to C, but then drop an octave. Because one of the most common things that goes wrong when dealing with the C clefs is that people end up writing music or reading it in the wrong octave because they're kind of relating it to the treble clef. So you see what we're doing. If you want to do it that way, you just think that's D in the treble clef, take it down one, but then drop an octave. So it's middle C. So obviously if we're now going down to this one, I could take this down from what would be F in the treble clef and call it E, but it's going to be E below middle C. So it's all the way down here. It seems incredibly low if you're sort of relating it to treble clef, but that's why these C clefs exist, so that players can play sort of notes that belong to the bass and the treble clefs and the notes in between in a clef where it all ends up in the middle of the clef most of the time. Okay, what's the third note? Well, if this one is C, you can just hop up a line and think, well, that's E, so it must be E sharp. Or you can think, well, it would be F sharp in the treble clef, but it would be this F sharp, wouldn't it? So take it down one, so you've got E sharp, and then drop down an octave, and you've got your E sharp. Okay, let's look at this one. Well, you could start to relate this to earlier notes. So we said that this was E, didn't we? Remember C, A, F, E. So this looks like a sort of skip down there, a third from there. So this one must be C. The other way you can see that it's C is that that's the same note as this one down an octave, isn't it? So if this is middle C, this is C down here, an octave below middle C. Let's look at the next one. If this is C, I'm going C, E, G. So it's G above middle C. Or I can say, oh, this is this A in the treble clef, so go down 1 to G, jump down the octave. Either of these ways will work for you. Okay, and what's the last one? If this is C, this is A, this is F, so it must be F flat below middle C. Or I can say, well, it's G flat in the treble clef, so I'm going to call it F flat. Because I've gone down one, then I'm going to drop an octave. So there we are, just a handful of notes in the tenor clef, just to kind of get you thinking about these things. So that if you need to read in the tenor clef or need to write in the tenor clef for anybody, you've got a way of doing it. So have fun with the tenor clef.